The day we got married, my wife was in a car crash, brain dead. My father-in-law demanded I hand over my multi-billion-dollar battery formula. It was Ava's dying wish, he said, to save the company. I gave it to him. Then, on an old iPad, I found a video of my wife in a bikini, kissing her ex on a yacht in the Caribbean. That idiot husband of mine, she laughed. He's probably crying his eyes out, writing up that formula for me right now. I smiled. Then I took the official death certificate her father had given me and walked into the county clerk's office. "Hello," I said. "My wife has passed away. I need to have her legally declared deceased." When I burst through the emergency room doors, carrying my wife in my arms. My brand new tuxedo was soaked in blood. The silk boutonniere on my lapel stained a dark, ugly brown. A shadow fell over me. Crack! A heavy slap snapped my head to the side. The taste of copper filled my mouth. "You're a curse. You're a goddamn curse." My father-in-law, David Miller, was red-faced, his finger jabbing at my nose as he screamed, "If anything happens to my daughter, I'll skin you alive." I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just slowly turned my head back, my eyes fixed on the scuffed linoleum floor. My mother-in-law, Karen, had collapsed onto a bench in the hallway, slapping her thighs and wailing. "My Ava, my poor baby. Why did this have to happen? A car crash on her wedding day. Why couldn't it have been him? Why didn't God take this useless piece of trash instead?" Her sobs and curses mixed with the ringing in my ears, and the world started to tilt. I stumbled back against the wall, its coldness seeping through the fabric of my suit, the shock of it clearing my head just a little. I didn't fight back. I didn't even let the anger or the hurt show on my face. I just watched them, my in-laws, as they performed their grief. 2 hours earlier, Ava and I had just finished our wedding ceremony. She insisted on driving back to her parents' old house alone, saying she'd forgotten something important. I'd offered to go with her, but she just smiled and told me to wait for her at her new place. She said she had a surprise for me. I couldn't say no to her, so I let her go. The next thing I knew, I was getting a call from a state trooper. At an intersection on the east side of Austin, her sports car had been T-boned by a runaway dump truck. It had flipped and ended up crumpled in a ditch. By the time I got to the hospital, they were pulling her out of the ambulance. I scooped her up and ran, screaming for a doctor. Now, the light above the operating room door finally flickered off. The door swung open and a surgeon in scrubs walked out, his face etched with exhaustion. He pulled down his mask and looked at us, his voice heavy. "Massive intracranial bleeding. Severe brain stem damage. She has no independent respiratory function." He paused, delivering the final verdict. "We've declared her brain dead. I am sorry. You should start making arrangements." A roar filled my ears, and my mind went blank. I've been preparing for the worst, but hearing those words, brain dead, felt like a fist closing around my heart, squeezing until I couldn't breathe. I tried to push past him to get into the room to see her one last time, but David Miller shoved me away. The force sent me staggering back into the wall. "Get away from her. She was going back to get your surprise. This is your fault. You did this to her. You don't deserve to see her." Through the open door, I saw Karen throw herself over Ava's body, which was tangled in a web of tubes and wires. The world went silent, and a deep, penetrating cold settled into my bones. That night, just as I was about to call a funeral home, David and Karen made a decision that stunned me. They were transferring Ava to another hospital. They'd already chartered a private medical flight to a specialized clinic in Switzerland. "American doctors don't know what they're doing," David said, his eyes bloodshot but fiercely determined. "I'm taking Ava to the best clinic in the world, to the top specialists. As long as there's a breath in her body, I won't give up." I looked at him, searching for the desperate, irrational love of a father. All I saw was a cold, unyielding resolve and an urgency I couldn't yet understand. They refused to let me go with them. "You're bad luck," they said. "You'll only make things worse." They pushed through all the paperwork, ignoring the doctors who pleaded with them, who told them that transporting a body with no life signs was pointless. They took Ava's body and were gone before sunrise. I stood in the hospital parking lot, watching the flashing lights of the ambulance disappear into the darkness. A bizarre, unsettling feeling crept over me. My mind, trained for years to analyze data, told me this was all wrong. It was too fast, too strange. But I told myself I was just in shock. that this was just a grieving father's last, desperate gamble. I was wrong. It was the beginning of a meticulously planned conspiracy. Two weeks later, David and Karen came back. They asked to meet me at a coffee shop. Their faces were grim. David looked like he'd aged 10 years. He was thinner, with dark circles under his eyes and a scraggly beard. He placed a small, black ceramic urn on the table between us. Then he slid a document across the table. It was a death certificate, stamped with an official-looking seal from a Swiss canton and the hospital's letterhead. "Ava didn't make it," David said, his voice a hoarse whisper. He looked down at his hands. Karen's eyes were red and swollen. Her shoulders shook with suppressed sobs. We stayed by her side for 2 weeks. The doctors tried everything, but they couldn't save her. I reached out, my fingertips brushing against the cool ceramic of the urn. This was my wife, the woman who had smiled at me at the altar, who had promised me a surprise. Now reduced to a box of cold, gray ash? My throat tightened. The world started to go dark at the edges. "Ethan," Karen looked up, her eyes swimming with tears. Before the end, she kept talking about the family business. She said her biggest dream after we married was for you two to bring the company back from the brink. "That's right," David added. He stubbed out his cigarette, his face obscured by a cloud of smoke. In the haze, I couldn't see the flicker of light in his eyes. The glint of pure greed. "Ethan, you're a genius. You're our family's only hope." He put a hand on my shoulder, squeezing hard. "That solid-state battery formula you've been working on, is it finished? It's time to give it to the company. It was Ava's last wish. It's the only thing that can save Miller Energy." The solid-state battery formula. The culmination of 3 years of my life. Countless sleepless nights. My entire soul poured into a string of equations. It was a revolutionary technology, something that could reshape the entire green energy sector. Once in production, it was worth billions. I had promised Ava I would give it to her family as a wedding gift, to help pull their failing company, Miller Energy Solutions, back from bankruptcy. I looked at the urn, then at their faces, a mask of grief and desperate hope. That feeling of wrongness from the hospital returned, stronger this time. But my grief went out. I finally nodded. "Okay, David, I'll do it." I thought they'd give me a corner office, a state-of-the-art lab, whatever I needed to finalize the formula. I was wrong again. They threw me in the damp, windowless basement of their old factory. "So you can focus," they said, "without any distractions." I was a prisoner. The heavy steel door was locked from the outside. The high walls surrounding the property were topped with broken glass. A silent, hulking maintenance guy named Gus was the only person I saw. He'd wordlessly slide a tray of food through a slot in the door twice a day. David would show up every few days to check on my progress, his tone condescending. All pretense of mourning his daughter was gone, replaced by a frantic, obsessive hunger for my work. "Ethan, how's it coming? How much longer? You need to hurry up. The market won't wait. Every day we delay is millions down the drain. Don't even think about trying anything funny. Remember Ava. This is what she wanted." I just sat there in silence, staring at the screen, my fingers flying across the keyboard day and night, translating complex chemical models into lines of functional code. I did what they told me to do. My grief was a lockbox. My suspicions were buried deep. They're just desperate, I told myself. Once I hand over the formula, everything will go back to normal. Then came a night, it all fell apart. I had just finished the last line of code. A gnawing hunger twisted my stomach. Gus was hours late with my dinner. Just as the hunger pains were making me dizzy, I heard footsteps outside the basement door. It was Karen, my mother-in-law, scrolling on an iPad as she walked. She shoved a container of cold, greasy leftovers through the slot without even looking at me, her face a mask of impatience and disgust. "Here, eat this and get back to work." She took a call and turned to leave, clearly not wanting to spend a second longer in the damp basement than she had to. But she left the iPad on the workbench. I stared at it. It was the one Ava loved with a rose gold case. Karen must have been carrying it around to feel close to her daughter. A strange impulse took over. I picked it up and swiped the screen on. No pascode. The home screen was open to an iCloud Drive folder. My thumb scrolled aimlessly through files, and then my eyes caught on a folder name. My Love. It was a locked album. It required a password. My heart started to hammer against my ribs. I tried Ava's birthday. Incorrect password. I tried her license plate number. Incorrect password. I tried my own birthday. Incorrect password. Then, a cold dread washing over me, I typed in the birthday of her high school sweetheart, Julian Vance. The album opened. The first high-resolution photo filled the screen, and the air rushed out of my lungs. Azure water, a brilliant blue sky, and a luxury yacht cutting a clean white wake across the ocean. In the center of the photo, a woman in a skimpy bikini held up a glass of champagne, grinning at the camera. Sunlight gleamed on her tan skin. The photo's metadata showed it was taken last week. I knew that face better than my own. Ava. My wife, Ava. The woman who was supposed to be in a cemetery, a box of ash. She wasn't dead. My brain felt like it had short-circuited. I stared at the screen, my knuckles white as I gripped the sides of the iPad, nearly cracking the glass. I swiped down, frantically, my heart pounding a sick rhythm. Photo after photo, each one a dagger in my chest. Ava and Julian Vance, wrapped around each other, kissing on the deck, chasing each other on a white sand beach, cuddled together in a penthouse suite. In every single shot, her smile was radiant, blissful, and absolutely soul-crushing. My body began to shake, an icy chill spreading from my toes to the top of my head. I tapped on a video file. The background was the same yacht. Ava was curled up in Julian's lap, the two of them flushed from a passionate kiss. "Babe, are you sure this is going to work?" Julian's voice was slick, amused. "What if that chump finds out?" Ava laughed, a tinkling sound, and slapped his hand away playfully. Her voice was syrupy sweet, but the words were venom. "Find out? No way. My parents are hitting him with a death certificate right now. That guy is so whipped, he'll do anything I say. He's probably locked in that disgusting lab, crying his eyes out while he finishes up my formula." She took a sip of her champagne. "Once he hands over that multi-billion-dollar formula, my dad's going to sell the company. We'll cash out and have enough money to live like this forever, anywhere in the world we want." At the end of the video, Ava raised her glass to the camera and blew a kiss, her red lips parting in a smirk. "Here's to my favorite workhorse. My darling husband, Ethan." The way she drew out the word husband was dripping with contempt. Boom! Something inside me snapped. It was all a lie, from the very beginning. A scam orchestrated by my wife, my in-laws, and her lover, all designed to trap me. There was no car crash, no brain death, no Swiss clinic. The urn, the ashes, all of it, a fabrication. They never wanted me. They only wanted the formula in my head. I sat there, motionless, as the video played on a loop. Ava's laugh and Julian's smug voice echoed in the silent basement. I didn't scream. I didn't smash anything. As an engineer, my instinct is to be methodical. In a crisis, you stay calm. Rage is useless. I needed to be rational. I needed to analyze the situation and formulate a response. I took a deep, shuddering breath, my lungs burning. Then I let out, slow and steady. I grabbed a charging cable from the workbench and plugged the iPad into my main computer. My fingers flew across the keyboard, a blur of motion. Ava's iCloud had pathetic security. For me, it was child's play. I downloaded everything. All the photos, the videos, their chat logs, bank transfer records, even the forged documents they'd created for the scam. I bundled all, encrypted it, and uploaded it to 3 separate, untraceable servers on the dark web. Once it was done, I scrubbed my digital footprints and placed the iPad back exactly where I'd found it. The whole process took less than 10 minutes. Just as I finished, Karen came back, looking for her tablet. I stood up and walked over to a metal storage cabinet. In its polished surface, I saw my reflection, pale, gaunt, with a ragged beard. But my eyes were different. The grief and confusion were gone. In their place was a cold, hard emptiness with something burning deep inside. A multi-billion-dollar formula? Fine. You want it so badly? I'll give you one. A formula that will burn the entire Miller family to the ground. For my mind raced, assembling the pieces of my revenge. The grief was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp focus. My only goal now was to design the perfect plan for their absolute destruction. Step 1. The foundation of my plan. The formula they so desperately craved. I pulled up the genuine solid-state battery schematics. The work of 3 years, every data point was flawless. It was stable, efficient, the future of energy. Then, I started to alter it. I built a backdoor. A fatal flaw. One of the most critical components of a solid-state battery is the electrolyte membrane. It governs safety and stability. My original design used a composite ceramic polymer, capable of maintaining its structural integrity even under extreme temperatures. Now, I needed to engineer a vulnerability. I altered the molecular structure of one key polymer. It was a minuscule change, undetectable in standard lab tests. In fact, under low-power simulations, its performance would appear identical to the original, maybe even slightly better in some metrics. But it was a Trojan horse. This modified membrane had a hidden, fatal flaw, a deliberately lowered threshold for thermal runaway. Once the batteries were mass-produced and subjected to continuous, rapid charge cycles, the internal temperature would inevitably spike past a critical point. At that moment, the membrane structure would collapse. The battery would either instantly fail or, more likely, trigger a catastrophic internal short circuit. The resulting recalls, lawsuits, and federal safety penalties would be enough to push Miller Energy into a black hole of debt from which it would never escape. I named my new creation project Icarus, after the fool from the myth who flew too close to the sun on wings of wax, only to plummet from the heavens into his own destruction. I looked at the lines of deadly, elegant code on my screen and allowed myself a cold, thin smile. The death warrant was signed. Now for the delivery. 3 days later, calculating that David's patience must be worn to a thread, I called him. "David, it's me," I said, my voice raspy and exhausted, playing my part. "The core formula is complete." I heard his breath catch on the other end of the line. I could picture his face, flushed with excitement. "Really? That's fantastic. Ethan, I knew you could do it." But I let the word hang in the air, pulling his heart back into his throat. As I was running the final simulations, I discovered a new potential pathway. If we can integrate a new type of carbon nanotube polymer, I think I can boost the energy density by at least 30%. My tone was flat, filled with the detached confidence of a scientist stating a fact. The line went silent. A 30% increase in energy density. That number was irresistible. It meant Miller Energy's product wouldn't just be competitive. It would dominate the market, crushing all existing technology. The company's valuation wouldn't be in the low billions. It would be 10, maybe 20. His greed was my greatest weapon. How long would that take? David's voice was trembling, trying and failing to conceal his elation. "I'll need new materials, new equipment. Calibration takes time." I paused for effect, then gave him a timeline he couldn't possibly refuse. "Give me 1 more month. I promise you, I'll deliver a formula that will change the world." "Yes, yes, of course." David agreed instantly, his tone suddenly warm and paternal. "Ethan, my boy, you've been working so hard. Don't you worry. Whatever you need, materials, equipment, just make a list and I'll have it sent over immediately. Anything at all." I lower my eyes, hiding the icy resolve in them. The hook was set. Now to reel him in. "I don't need anything for myself, David. It's just," my voice dropped, thick with manufactured sadness, "I keep having nightmares about Ava. I want to buy a burial plot for her, lay her to rest properly. I need to go into the city to file some paperwork." I heard him hesitate. I knew what he was thinking. That forged death certificate was the linchpin of their entire scam. It was also their biggest liability. But dangling on the other side of that risk was a formula worth tens of billions of dollars. I knew his greed would win. As I predicted, the hesitation lasted less than 2 seconds. Of course. You should do that," he said, his voice booming with false sincerity. "Ava would have wanted that. She'd be at peace knowing you cared so much. I'll have Karen drop off the documents for you tomorrow." A worthless piece of paper, in his eyes, in exchange for a future beyond his wildest dreams. To him, it was the deal of a lifetime. I hung up the phone and leaned back in my chair, letting out a long, slow breath. He took the bait. With that official, notarized death certificate in my hands, Ava Miller's legal existence was now mine to terminate. And how can a legally dead person maintain their citizenship? How can a person who doesn't exist inherit a family fortune? How can a ghost ever come home again? The game, Ava, is just beginning. 5 the next morning, the iron door to the lab creaked open. Karen walked in, her first time back in the basement since she'd left the iPad. She was dressed in a designer pantsuit, holding a silk handkerchief to her nose as if to ward off the smell of poverty. Her face was arranged in a mask of synthetic sorrow, her eyes artfully reddened. "Ethan, dear, here are Ava's papers." She handed me a sealed, waterproof document folio, her eyes gleaming with calculation. "Thank you, Karen." I took the folio and clutched it to my chest like a sacred relic. My voice broke, and my shoulders trembled, perfecting the image of a grief-stricken widower. Karen was clearly satisfied with my performance. She offered a few hollow words of comfort about moving on and honoring Ava's memory by finishing my work. I kept my head down and nodded numbly. She left, and the iron door clanged shut. The mask of grief fell from my face, replaced by a brutal calm. I opened the folio and carefully removed the original copy of the death certificate. White paper, black ink. It was a flawless forgery, good enough to fool anyone. This document was the lever I would use to break the Miller family. I folded it carefully and put it in my inside jacket pocket. Then I sat back down on my computer and got to work. I truly was optimizing the Icarus formula. I even drew up a long and complex procurement list filled with rare, expensive chemical compounds and precision instruments. When David received it, he didn't question a thing. He approved the budget instantly and had his procurement team rush the orders. He thought I was laying the foundation for his empire. He had no idea that every dollar he spent was another shovelful of dirt on his own grave. For the next month, I was a ghost. But on the outside, my lawyer, Mark Hansen, was already moving. Mark was a friend from my college days at Stanford, now one of the top estate and corporate lawyers in the country. He was cool, decisive, and a shark when it came to complex asset disputes. I had contacted him on a burner phone the day after I discovered the truth, sending him all the evidence I'd gathered through an encrypted channel. Even Mark, a man who'd seen everything, was silent for a long moment after reviewing the files. "Ethan, what do you want to do?" "I want them to lose everything," I said, my voice flat. "I want them ruined." "Understood." Mark didn't ask any more questions. He was all business. "I'll start the asset trace on Ava Miller immediately. Wait for my signal." On a bright, sunny morning, using the excuse of visiting cemeteries to choose a burial plot, I was granted a few hours of freedom. I didn't go to a cemetery. I took an Uber straight to the Travis County Clerk's office. The lobby was bustling, a chaotic symphony of ringing phones and public announcements. I took a number and sat in the waiting area. My palms were sweating, my heart thumping against my ribs. It wasn't nerves. It was adrenaline. The thrill of the hunt, the overture of my revenge. Now serving B, 47 at window 3. I stood up, took a deep breath, and walked to the counter. By the time I looked up at the clerk, my eyes were red-rimmed, my face a portrait of exhaustion and profound sorrow. "Hi, officer," I said, my voice cracking. I passed the death certificate, my ID, and our marriage license through the slot. My wife. She was in an accident overseas. She didn't make it. I'm here to file this and make it official. The clerk, a woman in her 50s, gave me a sympathetic look. She took the documents and began the routine verification process. She meticulously checked every detail on the death certificate, examining the Swiss hospital seal and the embassy's official stamp under a magnifying glass. Everything was perfect. "I'm very sorry for your loss, sir," she said softly, and began typing into her computer. My eyes were glued to her monitor. I saw her pull up Ava's official records. Her driver's license photo smiled back from the screen, bright and innocent. Then, the clerk's cursor moved to a button. It read, "Deceased." She clicked it. A confirmation box popped up. She clicked again. Instantly, Ava's name and social security number turned gray. A digital stamp appeared over her file. Status: deceased from that moment on. Ava Miller, a living, breathing woman somewhere in the world, was, for all legal purposes in the United States, erased. She was a ghost. I walked out of the government building into the blinding noon sun. I pulled out my phone and dialed Mark's number. "Mark, it's done." "Received," came his crisp, confident reply. "Ethan, I've completed the audit of Ava's assets. I have to say, your father-in-law is a real piece of work." 2 years ago, after a series of bad investments, David Miller was facing several lawsuits and massive debt. To shield his assets, he transferred his two most valuable holdings, an 80% stake in the factory and two multi-million-dollar mansions in a prime downtown location, entirely into Ava's name. His plan was likely to wait for the heat to die down and then transfer them back. He never imagined his daughter would legally die before he did. I got into the back of a waiting car service. Now, Mark continued, since Ava died without a will and you had no prenup, under state law, you are the primary heir. Since those assets were transferred to her before your marriage, they're considered her separate property. As the surviving spouse, you are entitled to 2/3 of her entire estate. The remaining 1/3 is split between her parents. Mark paused, then delivered the final blow, which means, as of this morning, you're the legal owner of 67% of everything that once belonged to David Miller. I watched the city blur past the window, a cold smile spreading across my face. You old fox, David. You handed me the rope to hang you with. Mark, I said, I want you to initiate an expedited liquidation of all my assets. Immediately. List the properties for sale. Find the most aggressive broker in the city, price them to move fast, and start shopping my shares of the company to private equity. I want it all turned into cash, as fast as humanly possible. Consider done, Mark said. Everything will be finalized before you ever have to set foot in that basement again. 6. The 1-month deadline arrived, awaited with equal anticipation by both myself and David Miller. I copied the complete Icarus formula onto a triple encrypted flash drive, then wiped every trace of the data and my activity from the lab's computers. I leaned back in my chair and waited. At 3 p.m., the iron door wasn't knocked on. It was kicked open. Bang! The door slammed against the concrete wall, shaking dust from the ceiling. David Miller stormed in, flanked by 4 menacing-looking thugs and a nervous-looking engineer. David was wearing a tailored suit, but he was casually flipping a switchblade in his hand. The friendly mask was gone, revealing the snarling greed beneath. Time's up, he said, stalking over to me. He pointed the tip of the blade at my throat. Where's the formula? I feigned terror, shrinking back in my chair and pointing a trembling finger at the flash drive on the desk. A triumphant grin spread across David's face. He snatched the drive, clutching it in his fist like a holy relic. The engineer hurried forward, plugged it into a laptop, and began verifying the data. A few minutes later, he looked up, his face glowing with excitement. Mr. Miller, the data is all here. The molecular models are complete, and initial simulations show performance metrics that blow everything on the market out of the water. Yes, yes. David threw his head back and laughed, a wild, manic sound that echoed in the cavernous basement. He turned back to me, his eyes filled with nothing but contempt. Now that he had what he wanted, he didn't need to pretend anymore. He drew back his leg and kicked me hard in the stomach. The force doubled me over, the searing pain making me gasp for air. I collapsed to the floor, clutching my gut, coughing. You useless parasite, David sneered, looming over me. He tapped my cheek with the flat of his blade. Now that I have the formula, you're of no use to me at all. He gestured to his thugs. In recognition of your brief time as my son-in-law, I won't have you killed. Now get the hell out of my factory and don't ever let me see you again. The 2 men grabbed me, hauled me to my feet, and dragged me out of the lab and through the factory. I didn't struggle. I let them shove and manhandle me like a rag doll. They threw me out the front gate, and I landed hard on the asphalt. My stomach was still throbbing, but I slowly, painfully got to my feet. I looked back at the big sign, Miller Energy Solutions. It glinted in the afternoon sun. Ignoring the jeers and laughter from the gate, I pulled out my phone. The pained, fearful expression on my face vanished, replaced by an icy calm. I dialed Mark. Mark, is it all done? His voice came back, crisp and professional. Consider it done, Mr. Cole. The mansions were sold for cash 3 days ago to a very motivated buyer. The factory real estate and your shares were acquired by a major holding company. The final wire transfer of $200 million cleared into your new corporate account yesterday. Which is to say, Mark added, as of this moment, the land David Miller is standing on no longer belongs to him. I started to laugh. A deep, genuine, liberating laugh. You want to mass produce your perfect formula, David? Be my guest. Use someone else's land and someone else's factory to build your own coffin. I hung up, hailed a cab, and disappeared into the city. The show was about to begin. 3 days later, all hell broke loose at Miller Energy Solutions. Hundreds of workers, who hadn't been paid in 6 months, stormed the property surrounding the main office building. They carried signs that read, "David Miller, pay US what you OWE, and corporate thieves go to hell." The mood was ugly, a powder keg waiting for spark. David, clearly caught off guard, was at the front entrance with a few security guards, trying to calm a mob. And that's when I arrived. I was wearing clean clothes, but my face was still pale and drawn, the perfect image of a victim who had just been chewed up and spit out. David saw me instantly. He ripped a bullhorn from a security guard's hand and pointed it at me, his voice blasting across the parking lot. "Listen to me. Everyone quiet down. The reason you haven't been paid, it's not my fault. All the company's money, it was stolen by that snake right there." He pointed directly at me. Him, Ethan Cole, my backstabbing, two-faced son-in-law. While my daughter's body was still warm, he used his position to drain the company's accounts of our last $5 million. In an instant, every eye in the crowd swiveled to me. Hundreds of pairs of eyes, filled with the anger and desperation of people who had been cheated. Their formless rage, expertly redirected by David, now had a single target. "Get him. That's the bastard. Give us our money. My kid needs surgery. You piece of scum." The hatred transferred in a heartbeat. The furious workers surged toward me, brandishing wrenches, pipes, even bricks they'd picked up from a construction pile. Someone threw a rock. I couldn't dodge in time. It struck me on the forehead, and a warm trickle of blood ran down into my eye, blurring my vision. The sight of blood seemed to give the mob a moment's pause. In that instant of hesitation, I moved. I lunged toward the man closest to me, twisted his wrist, and snatched the iron pipe from his hand before he knew what was happening. In one fluid motion, I vaulted onto the roof of a parked car. The sudden, athletic move stunned the crowd into a brief silence. I grabbed the bullhorn from a shock foreman standing nearby and roared into it. Everybody shut up. The amplified sound cracked like a whip, and the mob froze. I wiped the blood from my face, the red smear a stark contrast to my pale skin. I didn't waste time with words. I pulled an iPad from my satchel. One Mark had prepared for me. I held it high, propping the bullhorn beside me. A crystal-clear bank statement appeared on the screen, projected for all to see. "Open your damn eyes and look," my voice boomed, cold and sharp. "This is David Miller's personal bank account for the last 6 months. Look where the money is coming from. Every single payment to the company, every client invoice, it didn't go into the corporate account. He funneled it all into his own name and into an offshore trust in the Cayman Islands. The grand total is over $30 million. A collective gasp went through the crowd. Before they could process it, I swiped the screen. The image changed. Blue water, blue sky, a luxury yacht, and Ava, in a bikini, laughing as she kissed Julian Vance. And take a good look at this. This is the poor, dead daughter of his he was just crying about. She's alive and well. She's living it up on your paychecks, on the money you needed for your rent and your kids' medical bills. She's on a yacht in the Caribbean with her boyfriend. The silence that followed was absolute. Then, it shattered into a roar of pure fury. That son of a bitch. Liars. The whole damn family are liars. My money. That's my money. The rage of the workers, which had been aimed at me moments before, now turned back on its original source, magnified 100 times. Hundreds of murderous glares were fixed on David Miller, who stood frozen on the steps of the office, his face as white as a sheet. His knees buckled, and he nearly collapsed. "No, it's not real. It's fake. He photoshopped it. He's setting me up." His denials were pathetic, lost in the roar of the crowd. I held up another document Mark's courier had just delivered, the official deed and transfer of ownership for the factory. As of today, this company has a new owner. In front of everyone, I called the new head of finance and put him on speaker. "Right now," I commanded, "I want you to process payroll for every single employee who is owed back wages. Pay them what they're owed, plus interest, plus a severance of 3 months' salary. I want it done in the next 60 seconds. "Yes, Mr. Cole," came the reply from the phone. And almost as I finished speaking, a sound began to ripple through the crowd. Ping, 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 ping. Hundreds of cell phones, almost in unison, began to chime with notifications from their banking apps. A man in his 40s stared at his phone, then dropped to his knees and began to sob. It's here. The money is here. My son can have his surgery. His cry broke the dam. The crowd of tough, hardened workers erupted, many of them falling to their knees, weeping with relief and rage. I looked out at the scene. That money came from the sale of this factory. I announced into the bullhorn. David Miller ran it into the ground. There are no more jobs here. The 3 months' pay is your severance. I dropped the bullhorn on the ground. Without a backward glance, I walked through the parted crowd and out the factory gate. Behind me, I heard the sickening crunch of bone and the first of David Miller's screams. 8 David Miller screams were the first movement in my symphony of revenge. He didn't die. The workers were furious, but they stopped short of murder. By the time the police and ambulances arrived, he had 4 broken limbs and was lying in a pool of his own blood, barely conscious. What awaited him was worse than death. A month later, David Miller was formally indicted on multiple counts of embezzlement, wire fraud, and tax evasion. The evidence I provided was so airtight that the trial was a formality. He watched the news from his bed in the prison infirmary as the new owners of his former company held a press conference, unveiling the first test vehicles equipped with a revolutionary new battery. A local politician was on screen, praising the game-changing technology. David probably smiled, thinking his product was a success, thinking he could use future profits to bargain for a lighter sentence. His hope didn't last long. A breaking news alert interrupted the broadcast, shattering his last illusion. We have breaking news out of California, where a long-range test of a new electric vehicle has ended in disaster. The vehicle, traveling on Interstate 5, suddenly burst into flames. The fire was reportedly so intense that the car was completely incinerated in under a minute. The test driver managed to escape just before the explosion and was unharmed. The screen showed terrifying dashcam footage from a passing car. The test vehicle, cruising at highway speed, suddenly spewed thick smoke from its undercarriage before being engulfed in a massive fireball. Fire crews arrived, but the chemical fire was so hot they couldn't extinguish it. They could only watch as it burned itself out, leaving nothing but a charred metal husk. The news anchor concluded in a somber tone. Sources confirmed the vehicle was powered by the new Icarus solid-state battery, developed at the former Miller Energy Solutions plant. Federal investigators have already launched a full-scale investigation into the incident, and a nationwide recall has been issued. White-collar financial crimes were one thing. Knowingly producing a defective product that posed a catastrophic risk to public safety was another. His sentence was no longer a matter of a few years in a minimum security facility. It was a decade, at least, in a federal penitentiary. A guard at the prison later told a reporter that when David saw the news, he just froze. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Then his eyes rolled back in his head, and he collapsed in his wheelchair, the stench of urine filling the air. He was broken. As for Karen, she knew the game was up when David was arrested. She tried to sell off her last few assets and flee the country to meet up with her precious daughter. But Mark had already placed a lien on everything she owned. She was apprehended by Homeland Security at JFK Airport, trying to board a flight. She would be tried as an accomplice. The Miller family was finished. And me? I used the $200 million I'd liquidated from their assets as seed money to launch my own tech company. I unveiled my real formula. The perfect one. Venture capital firms fought each other to invest. My company, Phoenix Power, rose from the ashes of their greed and took the energy world by storm. 6 months later, I was on the cover of Time magazine, hailed as the new boy genius of American tech. The photo showed me in a sharp suit, standing in front of my gleaming, futuristic factory. The headline read, "The Man Who Sparked a Revolution." That same day, an unexpected visitor arrived at LAX. 9 Los Angeles International Airport, Tom Bradley International Terminal. A woman in flashy designer clothes and stiletto heels strutted up to the customs desk, dragging a Louis Vuitton suitcase behind her. It was Ava. After 6 months of living large, the money she'd left with was almost gone. Her lover, Julian, had long since grown bored of her and moved on to a new heiress. Her lavish lifestyle was coming to an end, and she decided it was time to come home and claim her throne at the head of the billion-dollar empire she assumed was waiting for her. She figured enough time had passed. The formula I delivered should be printing money by now. She was ready to collect. She slid her passport across the counter with an air of bored entitlement. "Hurry up," she snapped. "I have places to be." She pulled out a compact to touch up her lipstick, completely missing the customs officer's deepening frown as he scanned her passport. The moment he did, a piercing alarm shrieked through the entire arrivals hall. "WEWO, WEWO." Ava jumped, dropping her lipstick. "What the hell is wrong with your machine?" she demanded. Her answer came in the form of 4 heavily armed tactical officers who swarmed her from out of nowhere. Before she could even scream, they had her pinned to the floor, her hands cuffed behind her back. "What are you doing? Are you insane?" Ava finally found her voice, thrashing wildly. "Let me go. Do you have any idea who I am? I'm Ava Miller. My father is David Miller, the CEO of Miller Energy." Her screams attracted a crowd of onlookers. The customs officer walked out from behind his booth, holding her now void passport between his thumb and forefinger. He dropped it on the floor in front of her. "Ava Miller," he said, his voice cold and flat. "According to our records, that person was declared legally deceased 6 months ago." Ava's screams died in her throat. Her face went slack with shock. "They deceased? What are you talking about? I'm right here. I'm alive." "Our system says you're dead," the officer replied without a flicker of emotion. "Which makes you an undocumented, unidentified individual attempting to illegally enter the United States. You're being detained for questioning, pending immediate deportation." "No, it's not possible. It's impossible." Ava started screaming again, her voice hysterical. "It was Ethan. Ethan Cole did this. I want to see him. Give me Ethan Cole." But no one was listening. The officers dragged her away, her protests echoing through the terminal. 3 days later, after confirming her status as a legal ghost with no country willing to claim her, she was put on a plane and deported back to the small, third-world country where her fake death certificate had been issued. There were no blue waters or luxury yachts there. Only the mud and squalor of the monsoon season and the hungry, predatory eyes in the back alleys. I didn't bother to keep close tabs on her after that. Mark's private investigator would occasionally send a brief, dispassionate update. One report said she'd been robbed of everything she had within an hour of arriving. Another said she'd been bitten by a stray dog while fighting over a piece of bread. The wound became infected, and she was left with a permanent, hideous limp. Another said she'd been dragged into an alley by local gangsters. When she emerged, the light in her eyes was gone. The final report came with a single, grainy photograph. It was taken in a filthy, run-down red light district. Ava was there, wearing cheap, gaudy clothes and a thick mask of makeup. She was standing in a doorway, forcing a dead-eyed smile at a group of drunken men. In the background of the photo, a flickering, old-fashioned television was on. On the screen, the broadcast of the Global Tech Summit in Geneva was playing. And there I was in a custom-tailored suit, standing in a brilliant spotlight, speaking in fluent English to the world's most powerful investors, outlining my vision for the future. The sound of their applause was deafening. I stood center stage at the Global Tech Summit, the heat of the spotlights on my face. In the audience before me sat the titans of industry, the giants of finance, the shapers of policy from every corner of the globe. Their applause rolled through the auditorium, a wave of validation that went on and on. I had just concluded my keynote address on the future of sustainable energy. My company, Phoenix Power, the empire I had built with my own hands, had overnight become the most sought-after investment on the planet. Our valuation had just surpassed $100 billion. I smiled and bowed to the audience, my gaze sweeping across the front row. I saw the faces of venture capitalists who had once refused my calls, the industry veterans who had once called my research a pipe dream. Now, their eyes held a mixture of awe and desperate desire. I savored the moment. I had earned it. I had paid for it with 3 years of my life, 6 months of humiliation, and one perfectly executed act of vengeance. At the gala that evening, the air was thick with perfume and the clinking of champagne glasses. A steady stream of people approached me, offering congratulations, pressing business cards into my hand, all hoping to attach themselves to my rising star. I moved through the crowd effortlessly, shaking hands, smiling, exchanging pleasantries. My face was a perfect mask of gracious success. Inside, I felt nothing at all. My phone vibrated in my pocket. It was a text from Mark. A single photo and a short sentence. The photo was the one of Ava in the brothel. The dim lighting, the squalor, her vacant eyes and mannequin smile. A perfect, brutal contrast to the man I had become. The sentence read, David Miller had a heart attack in prison. He didn't make it. Karen was sentenced to 8 years. The Miller family was officially extinct. I looked at the photo again. In the image, Ava's hand was outstretched, as if trying to touch my image on the television screen. I could almost hear her whispering my name in despair. Crack. The sound of a cane striking flesh. Get back to work, you lazy whore. A voice shouted in a foreign tongue. I switched off the screen, deleting the photo and the last remnants of that life from my mind. I raised my glass of champagne to my lips and took a slow sip. Excellent vintage. A young journalist approached me, a microphone in her hand. Mr. Cole, congratulations on your incredible success. Everyone is wondering, what was the driving force behind this technological miracle you've created in such a short time? I turned to her, my smile unwavering and camera ready. A dream, I said. I raised my glass, toasting the glittering assembly before me, toasting the new world I had built for myself, and the simple belief in a better future. Yes, the future. My future. It was just getting started.